Welcome to today's People Strategy Forum podcast, where we're exploring unlocking success, step-by-step strategies for resolving business issues with none other than Chris Davenport. Known as the Wolf for his keen problem-solving skills, Chris is a renowned executive coach and visionary entrepreneur. His journey from spearheading 3i International to achieving staggering revenue growths and facilitating the company's high-stakes sale has cemented his reputation as a master strategist. Chris brings his rich experience in technology and strategic management to the forefront, mentoring CEOs and leaders to streamline their operations and drive sustainable growth. His approach combines cutting-edge technologies with the finesse of emotional intelligence and accountability. Join us as Chris shares his proven strategies and insights on transforming business challenges into success stories. Hi, Chris. Welcome to the People Strategy Forum.
Hey, Sam, how are you doing today?
Doing great. So, Chris, the first thing we typically do in these conversations is really kind of dig in and have the audience learn a little bit more about you and what drives your passion and why you serve the people that you do. So, do you mind telling us a little bit about your backstory and how did you get into this business of helping leaders?
Definitely, Sam. I've been a lifelong entrepreneur, and I kind of started my journey by accident and just fell into the technology space and fell in love with technology, but didn't know much about business at the time. And this was right during my college years, and I just learned as I went along, and along the way, I had several tests and failures, as you can imagine. But the really neat thing was because I worked with small and mid-sized businesses, I learned a ton from the leaders of those companies. Some by accident, others, ears would perk up and listen when you hear some gold that these older people are sharing, that started their businesses 30, 40 years ago. And a lot of that stuck with me. And I found that, spending that extra time listening, I applied that to my own business, started to grow, took advice from these people. And it really helped me recognize how important people are, and relations are in business and in your personal life. But just staying on top of topic of business for right now, it became so important on so many levels, knowing these people and seeing what they have gone through, and they're sharing their success and their failures and how they got there. And so I started to put things together, grew my own company, ended up starting a partnership with a colleague, and him and I grew a technology company to, about 10 years ago, we grew to, let's say, 20 employees, and we got stuck. We hit the ceiling around 10 million in revenue, and we just started any problem we had very fast growth. Any issue we had, it was just magnified. It's like we felt like an ant under the magnifying glass in the summertime, used to play with as a kid. It was not a pleasant feeling. And we, we went out to figure out what to do. And that's when we found a system called EOS, which stands for Entrepreneurial Operating System. And it changed my life. It changed our company. It is just a very simple set of tools. When implemented properly, helps you break through the ceiling and get unstuck. So we went from pulling our hair out, everybody's going in different directions, to 2 years after that, it everything started to align, and we all started rowing in the same direction. Continued to grow, got to about 35 employees, and I enjoyed EOS so much, I was able to step out of the business some to start coaching for friends and other companies that had, heard of me through word of mouth. So I started helping them on their EOS journey. because my passion is helping people be their best at what they do professionally. And so just a great alignment with my core values. And so I just continued on that journey, ended up getting an offer for the business my partner and I decided to sell. And then I started to pursue EOS and coaching full time at that time. And I still have some projects that I work on here and there, you know, but but my focus since then has been implementing for companies and helping them, break through the ceiling, helping them solve problems, and really just trying to be uh, a good advocate for them when they have an issue that they don't know what to do with. I'm there for that as well.
And therein lies the root of our conversation for today, is really to help, the techniques to help leaders, like break through that ceiling, ensure that they can understand a particular problem, scope it, and get beyond it. And so I'm really excited to dive into that with you today. And I imagine you'll be bringing up some of the EOS toolkit on some of
Yes.
those details. Great.
Definitely, definitely, and I look forward to jumping into it. Every business has problems. I think there's an old I don't know if it's a wives' tale, but I think there's no more than 137 different issues in business, but we've all seen them all, right? So
Yeah. So
just
is there a particular area where new entrepreneurs get stuck? Where's the first sticky place that they find themselves get into?
I would say, you know, there's a couple areas that come to mind. I'm going to share the first one. They say yes to too many things.
Hmm.
And that becomes a problem in itself because when you say yes, uh, a lot of success breeds a lot of overhead, or little success breeds a lot of overhead. And so that's in one area. Another area is they don't find the right people to get into the boat with them.
Hmm.
It's tough. It's tough to find the right people, and I don't think it's because they don't want the right people. It's because sometimes when you start something, the people around you don't continue to grow with you. And sometimes you have to make that hard decision to find new people to help you row that boat.
Right.
And so those are issues that come up frequently, with people starting up there.
Yeah, I've heard both of those. Specifically, saying yes to too many things, getting outside your wheelhouse. That not focusing on your niche, things like this. I mean, seems to be all part of that first equation. Is that right?
It is, and to go deeper into that, one problem that EOS helps entrepreneurs with is really getting that focus on where they're going and how they're going to get there.
Hmm.
And because as entrepreneurs, most of us, we see an opportunity and we're like a squirrel. We're going to run after it.
Right.
And that's not always the best thing. Um, because as you know, squirrels, they find a bunch of nuts, hide them. They don't know where they hid them at. The other squirrels are stealing their nuts. They don't even know what they did with them. So it's similar with ideas entrepreneurs have, come out of their head. They're chasing stuff all around and which causes more issues. And so their focus, instead of, being like a laser beam on a single point, just that small amount of energy makes a huge difference versus the sun shines on the earth, 8 to 10 hours a day, depending on where you're at. And, you might get a little sunburn. So it's important to keep them focused. And that's something that we work on. One of the first tools actually that we work on together to get them to achieve that focus.
Well, let's start with the back up just a little bit. I imagine you come into situations where an entrepreneur comes your way and they're just thinking, gosh, this is just too hard. This is too hard. Something's wrong here. I don't know what it is, but I'm doing something wrong. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And they reach out for help. And so, what is the process that you use to identify the problem, the root cause of the problem that they're experiencing?
What I do when they come to me and they're, they think things have gotten too hard like that. What I like to do in that situation is start to sift out what's really happening. And it is part of the problem solving framework that I use, naturally. And getting to the root of the issue, or it could be, in some cases, Sam, this makes it even more difficult. It's more than one issue. And a lot of times we don't recognize that when we're in the problem. We think, oh, I've got a problem. But it's a lot harder when it's more than one issue. And so what I do is I start to talk to them, and I use a mirroring approach. So to get them to think, I mirror back what they're saying to me. It's a technique that Chris Voss shares in one of his books. I think it's Never Split the Difference, and a great book, by the way. And it helps people, when you reflect back to them the things they're saying, it helps them go deeper in those scenarios and problems to where you're getting down further towards the root of things. Because we're emotional beings. We want to share with each other how we feel, how things quote unquote make us feel. When the reality is, Sam, that the 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 feelings we have is something that we've made up in our head, and that we have chosen to exert those feelings outward. And it's difficult, though, for us, even me sometimes, to recognize this in the moment. So I go through a process to get them to reprocess what's happening, to share more information so we can get more data and really get down to the baseline issue. And then from there, we argue for both sides of it. Is there evidence to support what's going on? What you're seeing? Is there evidence against it? And then after us as humans see that, it's like being in a courtroom. You have to, it's not a feeling, well, I feel this, I think this. It's more like I saw this, I'm seeing these things happen, and that's the evidence. Versus I feel like the sales team is underperforming. Well, how do you know, Sam?
Hmm.
Well, I just feel like it. They're not, I don't feel like they're on the same bus as I am. Well then, okay, well, what are the numbers? Well, I don't know. Well, that's a place to start. How much are you spending in marketing? Those kind of questions. And you start to get down to the root may in fact be that they're not getting enough leads, or you're in the wrong target market, you know.
Yeah, so it's really taking a data-driven approach to understand what the problem is. And if they're not tracking metrics, identify the correct metrics that that can identify the problem or bring some clarity. Is that is that right?
Definitely. And they need to be tracking uh, the metrics, 5 to 15 metrics that if they were, and this is an exercise I take them through. Imagine yourself on a deserted island, and you're sitting there in a chair looking out at the ocean, and the waiter comes and he brings you a drink. And he hands you that drink, and in addition to that drink, he hands you a piece of paper. What would need to be on that piece of paper for you to know, just at a quick glance, how good or bad your business is performing at any given time? And that's kind of the jumping off part. And then, of course, I have recommendations and thoughts that I share along the way. Um, but removing yourself from the business, thinking, I'm not there, I don't have a phone, I don't have a computer, what would I need to see? And those metrics become what what the focus is, and those help solve problems because when you see, things are on, it's great. If they're off, then it's treated like a fire alarm, and we need to see why and get down into that number to see what's going on there.
Okay, so creating a dashboard of metrics that the leader can look at from, is there a particular review time? I mean, this is not an annual process. I imagine it's quarterly, monthly, something like this. What's the best
Typically,
frequency?
what I feel the best frequency and EOS recommends as well is to have 13 weeks at a glance. So you're basically looking at a quarter. Each week, the metric is updated, and there's one person accountable to that, to each metric. So there's accountability, and you're looking at things at a glance, a quarter back, and which helps you become a better predictor, which helps you break through the ceiling in future problems. And that's what I recommend.
So looking at a trailing 3 month uh, averages, I suppose you say over to forecast the future of that metric.
Yes. So if I look back over 3 months of data, I should be in a good position to make an educated guess about what's going to happen next week, next
Mhm.
2 weeks, next month.
Great. And went through that trend analysis, identify problems and points of concern, or before they become a problem.
Yes. So as you have these metrics, you also have, what the metric should be, say it's marketing leads. And we need a minimum of marketing leads of, say 10 a week. And so if it's 10 or more, great. If it's 9 or less, then that's a fire alarm. The bells go off. And then you need to start to go through a process called IDS, which is you're identifying the issue. Hey, our marketing lead number is off this week. And then you discuss it. Hey, why do we think it's off? Does anybody have any ideas of what to do to correct it? Um, what is the issue here so we can start to dive in order to get to a solve, to get to a place to where we can solve the issue.
So great to identify, discuss, and then solve. IDS.
Yes.
Great.
Yes.
So a lot of times, well, I guess you could say that most of the people that join us on this podcast and listen to this podcast are founders, entrepreneurs, and of companies, and specifically focused around creating workplaces that attract the best talent, retain, they can retain their top performers and motivate their staff overall. Now, one thing that you mentioned in the beginning of this, when we said some of the most common problems that businesses have, one was, that you mentioned that one of those make sure that you get the right people in the boat with you, you know,
Yes.
and so really attracting that critical talent and retaining that talent and keeping them motivated long term. So, what do you typically see in small to medium sized companies in around that? What are the typical problems that you're seeing, and what are some of the ways that you can help them solve those issues?
Sam, what I typically see and I think there was a recent survey that 72% of companies are experiencing people issues. And I don't remember where that number came from, but certainly resonated with me. And people is one of the six main components of EOS. So there's a lot of tools behind that. And what I see when you see a healthy, cohesive leadership team that meets regularly and communicates well and leaves the planning meeting on the same page, and they have a unified front, uh, and they communicate their vision clearly, regularly to their people. And when the managers of the people, they lead based on the core values of the company. And make sure that everyone is living up to those core values as best as they can. I think that's a great start because a lot of the complaints I have, from I've hired and worked with thousands of people over the years, and in my business and in other companies that I've worked with. And when people don't know the direction, when they don't know what they're supposed to be doing or acting like, they're not happy. They're not happy people at work, and when you give people a direction of the where the company's going and how they can, you give them a something they can be accountable for, a scorecard of their own, and that's how they are contributing to that, to that vision. It's like magic. It makes for happy employees. The other thing it does, Sam, on the flip side of that is sometimes people just aren't a fit culture wise. And so it's made to have those issues fall out quickly so we can get that person, out of the organization, and there's probably a great fit for them somewhere, but it's not here. And to identify that quickly, because when there's someone working against the grain, it causes, strife with everyone on their team. And there's usually a sigh of relief. I had a customer, they were in my session room a couple of weeks ago, and there was somebody on the leadership team, and they just, quarter after quarter just weren't hitting, and they just didn't fit with the core values. And they ended up, leaving the company, and everybody just sigh of relief when that person was gone. They liked him as a person. They tried, they put all of the effort forth, but when it's not a match, it just makes everyone unhappy. So long story, to wrap it up, it helps to communicate regularly and have a unified front and make sure people know their place in the vision and the plan so they feel like they're part of something, and that drives people and that makes for happy workers.
So we're embarking on a new year here, and well, how should companies really clarify this message? Let's say that we have a listener that is a leader that's listening in and saying that, well, okay, well, here's 2025, and we haven't really gotten around to really doing some clear planning, really is reestablishing our values and direction for the year. What are the first steps that leader should do to get back on the rails there?
Well, of course, I would recommend EOS, but if not EOS, I'd recommend picking a system. You have to have a system to run your business on. And EOS is defined in a book called Traction that Gino Wickman authored. It's a great read. Uh, I would recommend starting there and just listening to the different pieces of what is recommended to do. But really getting in a room with your leaders and determining and agreeing upon where you're going this year. You know, what market are you targeting? Why do you exist as a company? What are our core values? And we all need to agree, hey, we're gonna measure our people against these core values to make sure they're living up to them and help them when they fall below, help them try and help them up to live to them, tell them why. Typically they come around. And so I would recommend to them to disappear for a day with your team. Do that. Um, do some team building exercise after, just to build that team trust. Um, and that will be a good start to the year for them.
Great. So a company has gone out, they've reestablished, they say, okay, these are our core values. This is the reason why we exist and what we're trying to achieve as an
Yep.
organization. and then putting together some high level goals for the organization for that particular year. But then you mentioned specifically ensuring that people are accountable for their own metric. And
Yes.
so how do we take that overall vision, their why, and those goals that you have for the general goals for the company, and boiling it down to individual accountability?
It's best when you're working with, someone that knows EOS. Like if it were me, uh, to help you fill out these tools and implement these different pieces. Assuming you have that, what's going to happen, and it's probably similar with non-EOS systems as well. The leadership team is going to determine what the different levers of the business are that need to be measured in order to know what, when something's turned on, it increases profits. If something's turned off, it causes issues. Determining what those metrics are, assigning those, metrics to an individual, not too many per individual, and making sure that the roles in the accountability chart, making sure the roles defined match up with the different metrics that you're assigning the people to.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes sense, So, for example, someone in procurement is not getting a marketing related metric,
Right.
making it match up properly. Then communicating to the individuals throughout the organization, hey, this is, we have determined as a leadership team, these are the markers that we need to measure. You are responsible for inbound leads,
Mm-hmm.
from say inbound Google leads. You're responsible for managing that. And we need a minimum of 10 per week. And that's what they're measured on. And each week they're held accountable by measuring how they did and bringing up issues when they fall short and celebrating wins when things go well.
And one of the things is, I think that a lot of business owners take uh, have a problem with in goal setting is that there's a lot of goals out there that are more kind of vanity metrics, versus goals that really matter. And so, can you define? I mean, in your opinion, how does a leader define what goals really matter in their business?
There's an exercise that we take them through to determine, and it's them, Sam, it's them doing the work. I'm
Mm-hmm.
just helping them get there. Um, the answer is always in the room. And someone on the leadership team is going to know, what the most important goal is to go after.
Mm-hmm.
And I know what you mean by, vanity goals. There's some goals that just, you know, you have to determine, you have to back into it and determine, is this goal or metric, how is this going to affect the bottom line?
Yeah.
And if it's a vanity metric, you'll quickly find out that, well, you know, if we're doing, one article a week in Forbes magazine, does it really move our numbers? Most businesses probably not. Now, if you're going after private equity money, yes, that's something you'd want to do. But you really just have to determine, how is it going to impact what we're doing on a regular basis? How is it going to impact our output and our profit in the long run? Is it worth the investment or not?
Great, thank you for that. So, I mean, as you're, I mean, the main core of our conversation here is really to solve problems, or have leaders identify what the issues are, understand how to remove the emotion from that issue, and to find ways to solve it effectively. So
Yes.
in our conversation today, we've talked about many things, from goals and so forth on this. What are the top things that you want our listeners to walk away with from this discussion?
I'd like to point out again, just for solving problems, for the sake of solving problems, having an operating system for your business gives the space or the air for the problems to have, in order to get solved. I think that's step one. A lot of people don't even take the time to meet regularly. And a lot of meetings are one-sided, or me sharing information with you, say if we were in a meeting, that's one-sided, versus having a true meeting that you're trying to solve problems is a collaborative effort of, you know, assuming the leadership team here, that everyone's involved in solving the problem and bringing up problems. When you start to get strong in EOS, the problems start to fall out, and having a place for them is first. The next is you need to have a high trust amongst your leaders. So you need to work on trust building. If there's a trust issue there, somebody's going to be afraid to share a problem, or they may be afraid to share a solution. And so these are kind of groundwork things that, some people take for granted because they have them, but a lot of companies I see, they don't have that yet. And so I think I'm of the position I have to meet people where they are. And so that's a baseline of things you need in order to start effectively solving problems. Then from there, you really need to work on, you need to do some work on, instead of focusing on the emotion or the feeling that you're experiencing as an individual. When you're in a problem, it's very easy to default to that. Um, and so I would encourage them to do some work at just pausing and taking a second to really dissect the problem and think, okay, my reaction is I'm angry, the numbers are off, and people aren't doing anything. Well, that's probably not true. So you just need to take a moment and to start to write down your thoughts and get down to, okay, what are the people doing? Let's evidence against my thought. Then what are the people not doing? And then so evidence to support my thought. And start to make sure that these pieces of evidence are, imagine yourself in a court, and the judge is going to call you out if it's hearsay, if it's, made up. They're going to call you out. So treat yourself the same way. Make sure it's real. And once you start to do that, the real issue that you can start to focus on will kind of come out of that. And I know some of this is philosophical, but it really works. It helps to get to that real issue. And once you've built the space, have the team trust, you can start to solve those issues together as a team. And we all know, you know, five brains are better than one if, say, your team has five people on it. So I'd say the last thing I would say is make sure you're not solving these issues in a vacuum. You need to be using your team, to identify that issue, because they could see it differently than you, because they may have more information, more credible information than you do. So that's what I would recommend.
Right. And a lot of our listeners are probably thinking, well, geez, well, the first thing that you mentioned is do you have an operating system? And it's like, well,
Yes.
some of them may be saying, well, I went to business school, but I don't know what kind of operating system. Or we have SOPs here and there and so forth. And so and when we think of EOS, what types of companies is that best suited for? Size, industry?
It's really industry agnostic. Size, anywhere from 5 to 200 employees, up to around 150 million in revenue. I've seen it work for smaller startups if they know EOS and they love it already and they're starting something new. And I've seen it continue to work for larger companies that started with EOS. Um, I know a company that's grown to 500 million in revenue and they're still on EOS. And
Hmm.
So that's really the demographic. Um, Now the psychographic pieces are they have to be more afraid of the status quo and they want to be than they are of change. They have to be open to changing because they're hitting the ceiling for a reason
Right.
and something needs to change and willing to have uncomfortable conversations with each other and it be okay. So willing to build a high trust relationship with their team members and also willing to just be unified on going forward with what the leadership team decided. So if there was one dissent, unlike the Supreme Court, you know, that doesn't come out. It stays in that room. And when you leave there, we're on the same page. And that's really the psychographic piece of EOS.
Great. Well, thank you for that. So for those that are interested in learning about more about EOS and what's involved there, I mean, what should they do?
I have a website. It's chd2.com. And on there, I offer a free 90-minute meeting. It's an educational meeting on EOS to see if it's a fit for you or not. And there's also, of course, the eosworldwide.com, which is EOS's site. And I'd highly recommend reading the book by Gino Wickman called Traction. That's he's written several, but that's the one to start with.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Chris, for your time today. It was great to go through this problem solving discussion and talk about goals and everything for this to ensure that those leaders out there that are a bit lost find a way to get back on track. So thank you for your time today.
Thanks, Sam. I really enjoyed it.
All right. And to everyone that's listening in, we'll see you next week on the People Strategy Forum. All right. Take care, everyone. Welcome to today's